back on this or not. Donald Trump will be speaking imminently, and when he does, we'll take you there. And speaking of great stupidity, the Chinese mega embassy has today been approved. What do you think to that? I'll be speaking to Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp about it. And that Labour defection to reform the UK that was promised today didn't happen, but a court hearing did, trying to legally challenge the cancellations of local elections. Let's take a look. And research out today says education is, I quote, the most important dividing line in attitudes towards immigration. Here we go again. All of that and lots more. My panel tonight, the pollster and academic Matt Goodwin. Alongside him, the former political director to Keir Starmer, Luke Sullivan. But before we get stuck in, here are your 6 o'clock news headlines.
Michelle, thank you, and good evening to you. The top story tonight at 6. The government has approved plans for a Chinese mega embassy in central London. That despite intelligence chiefs warning the security risks cannot be completely eliminated. The site near the Tower of London will become the largest Chinese embassy in Europe, a move ministers say is being managed with proportionate safeguards. Security Minister Dan Jarvis says he's satisfied that the risks can be appropriately managed, even though MI5 and GCHQ admit threats can't be fully removed. Critics warn the site could be used for surveillance and intimidation, but Downing Street insists embassies are still the first line of communication between nations, as the UK pushes for closer ties with Beijing. Well, the Conservatives' James Cleverly described today's approval of that embassy a disgraceful act of cowardice from the Labour government and the Prime Minister.
Reeks of predetermination. We have known that the Labour government wants to curry favour with the Chinese government. They are rolling out the red carpet because they're desperate for a trade deal. And this greenlighting of this huge embassy, not listening to the security concerns that many people have expressed, reeks of predetermination, and that's a Labour government who are basically willing to do whatever it takes to curry favour with the Chinese government.
Donald Trump has branded Britain's decision to hand sovereignty of the Chagos Islands to Mauritius an act of great stupidity, linking it to his push for the US to acquire Greenland. Posting on social media, the US president claimed the move was yet another national security failure, despite the UK retaining the US-UK military base there under a 99-year lease. Well, his comments come as Mr. Trump doubles down on threats of sweeping tariffs against the UK and Europe and refuses to rule out military action over Greenland. Well, as Michelle mentioned, we are expecting to hear from Donald Trump shortly from the White House, confirming he will appear at that press conference within the next few minutes. We will, of course, take you live straight there when that happens. Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch spoke to us earlier this morning about the situation.
Where other countries, including the US, do things that are good for British national interest, we agree. When they don't, we disagree. On Chagos, I think he said the right thing. On Greenland, completely disagree. We need to work together, not just across the aisle with Labour, but with other countries. What is important is that the people of Greenland decide their future. This is, the Chagosians wanted to stay under British rule. The people of Greenland do not like the conversations that are taking place. And I have urged President Trump to stop this. This is not going to be good for NATO or the strategic Western alliance.
In other news tonight, police have taken the rare step of publicly criticising prosecutors after a decision not to bring further charges against Lucy Letby. The former nurse is already serving 15 whole-life sentences for murdering 7 babies and attempting to kill 7 more. But the Crown Prosecution Service says the evidential test was not met for additional allegations of murder or attempted murder. Cheshire Constabulary, though, says it expected charges, adding this is not news worth celebrating, they say, and urging respect for the families involved. UK unemployment has held steady at 5.1% according to figures out today, but there are fresh signs elsewhere in the jobs market things could be getting worse. Wage growth has slowed again, with average regular earnings rising by 4.5%, making it the weakest pace in nearly 3 years. The ONS says jobs pressure is building in retail and hospitality, even though pay is still rising slightly faster than inflation. And Brooklyn Beckham has said he doesn't want to reconcile with his family in his first public comments addressing months of speculation about a rift with his parents. In a series of Instagram posts last night, the eldest son of David and Victoria Beckham accused them of attacking him and his wife through the media, claiming they tried to ruin his marriage. After trying to keep the dispute private, he says he felt he had no choice but to speak the truth. Those are the 6 o'clock headlines. Do stay with us for that hotly anticipated press conference with Donald Trump. For now, though, it's over to Michelle and the panel.
Thank you for that. I'm Michelle Dewberry. This is Dewbs & Co keeping you company until 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, pollster, academic and GB News presenter Matt Goodwin. Alongside him, former political director to Keir Starmer, Luke Sullivan. Good evening, gents. You're both very welcome tonight. As, of course, each and every single one of you at home, do tell me what, ladies and gents, is on your mind tonight. Join the conversation in all the usual ways. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.com. Go to the website, gbnews.com/yoursay, or you can get me, of course, on social media. Now, the big topic of conversation tonight is, of course, the one, the only Brooklyn Beckham. Did you see it? No, I'm only kidding. Don't worry about that, ladies and gents. We've all got enough drama in our own families, frankly, haven't we, without involving ourselves in that of other people. I'm speaking, of course, though, the big news, Donald Trump. Can you believe, everybody, that it is a year to the day that he had his second inauguration? I'm sure that you were all glued to GB News with me and Martin Daubney as we covered all of that. I can't believe it. It's absolutely flown by. And, of course, Donald Trump continues, doesn't he, to dominate the political agenda both there, here and beyond. It's all kicked off again today. We've covered and discussed the Chagos deal at length. Well, Donald Trump took to Truth Social to issue another statement about the UK, where he was talking about their, quote, brilliant NATO ally, us here in the UK. And this whole notion of us handing over the Chagos Islands and essentially paying for the privilege of doing so. He says we're doing this, quote, for no reason whatsoever. And he calls it an act of great stupidity. And he says, he's talking about things like Denmark, etc. And he says European allies have to do the right thing. Well, let's just remind ourselves. So there you go. You've got Donald Trump saying this is an act of great stupidity. You remind ourselves what David Lammy had to say about this.
If President Trump doesn't like the deal will not go forward. And the reason for that is because we have a shared military and intelligence interest with the United States. And of course, they've got to be happy with the deal or there is no deal.
Well, I hate to break it to you, but it sounds very much to me like Donald Trump does not like the deal. Let's listen to Darren Jones and what he was saying about this today.
We have secured that as a military base for the next century because the sovereignty of the island was being challenged. But we agreed it was important for our security capabilities in the world, including for our NATO partners, which includes the United States. We needed to find a way through that protected that. That was done. It was welcomed by the American administration when we've done it. The treaty has been signed, and so there'll be no changes on the Chagos Islands.
Doesn't really wash with me and a great many other people, actually, because the deal has not been ratified into law, so it can absolutely be changed. So I'm not quite sure what Darren Jones is talking about there. Are you, Luke?
Well, I mean, it's another extraordinary day, and I think probably like many of GB News watchers woke up to the news of another Donald Trump post on Truth Social, which had clearly set the cat amongst the pigeons politically in the UK. I think what the government's argument here is that, without trying to get into a war of words with President Trump and the US, that President Trump has signalled through people like the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, back in May, that they supported the deal, that the president has said supportive words, and that essentially, all intents and purposes, the deal is done. Now, the bill is at its very final stages in the I think it was in the House of Commons today or tomorrow.
But it's not done then, is it? So why is Darren Jones? I mean, I don't expect too much from Darren Jones, actually, because Darren Jones is the guy that tried to convince everybody that most of the people on these not-so-small boats are women and children. So he's probably got some kind of issue, perhaps, with his eyesight. So I don't take him too literally sometimes. But he must know that that deal has not been done to the point where it can't be reversed.
Well, I mean, I think what the government are trying to signify is that they're from their position, that the position is going to change. They think all the agreements have happened. There was obviously a lot of very high-level security discussions with the United States. Now, I think the point that you are not unfairly making is President Trump has said what he has said. Now, one of the other lines from Number 10, who are clearly seeking not to get into this war of words with President Trump, was to say that they would have conversations, you know, at official levels through private back channels to find out exactly where President Trump is.
Matt Goodwin?
Well, I agree with President Trump that this was always an act of stupidity by the Labour government and indeed their Tory predecessors to set up the Chagos deal. I wish President Trump had reached this conclusion about a year ago and had really looked at the Chagos deal at that point in time, because giving away our national territory and our strategic assets while forcing the British people to pay £35 billion never really made any sense to me, nor does the argument today that we need to respect the views of the people of Greenland, and we can't possibly allow anything to happen there without the views of those people being taken into consideration, while simultaneously ignoring the views of the Chagosians and the people who have been saying time and time again they don't want to be handed over to powers that are aligned with our enemies, and watching Keir Starmer on the one hand say, well, international law or some advisory judgment counts over here, but over here we need to respect the sovereignty and the democratic views of the people of Greenland. That is completely inconsistent to me. Personally, I don't agree with what President Trump is doing with regard to Greenland, but I do hope the Chagos deal collapses, because I think it makes absolutely no sense to me, or nor to millions of British people out there.
I mean, Luke, you are a man that knows Keir Starmer very well. It goes as far as saying that you are, you know, his former right-hand man and quite largely responsible for the fact that he is now our Prime Minister. How do you think he is dealing with Donald Trump?
I think he's doing a good job. Now, I think there are two schools of thought on this. You can either do what Keir Starmer's doing, which is to try and find a bit of an unlikely working relationship. I think both President Trump and Prime Minister Keir Starmer have said that they're not from natural political bedfellows, but they have found a way of working. And Keir, I think, as your viewers will have seen on Monday morning, a big thing about his approach to life, his approach to politics, is not to be showy, is not to sort of make these big grand statements, not seek to sort of have performative outrage. The other approach is what Emmanuel Macron and other European leaders have done, which is, you know, to say a lot of very difficult words at President Trump. Now, look, ultimately, we will only tell in the fullness of time what approach works. But I think the benefit to the approach that Keir Starmer made and is doing, and yes, it's difficult at this time, but we saw what happened when President Zelensky, Vice President J.D. Trump and President Trump had this big row in the Oval Office. We had a load of European leaders take to Twitter denouncing President Trump and his behaviour. What did Keir Starmer do? He didn't take to Twitter. He picked the phone up and he was one of the first people to try and patch it up. Now, I think that's probably the right approach for dealing with President Trump. It does mean that it's difficult when there are times like this where there are issues like Chagos deal, which clearly hit both a geopolitical position but also a home domestic political audience as well.
I know, but so one of my viewers, he just got in touch and said, Michelle, this whole Chagos thing is an act of treason by Keir Starmer.
Look, I would strongly rebut and refute that. Look, where I agree with what Matt was saying before was this was a process started under the Tory government.
Yeah.
It has hung around, and I think there's a number of stories we're going to be talking about today. Chagos Islands, the issue with the Chinese embassy, where they've started under a Tory government and they haven't taken a decision. Now, none of these decisions are easy. They are difficult decisions. The choice the Prime Minister took, and I understand different people disagree with it, but he took a decision to try and resolve the legal issues, to get a 140-year lease, which secured
but we didn't
this
have to do any of this, Luke.
Well,
this is the bit that blows the mind of many people watching and listening to this programme. Some of these rulings, they were advisory opinions. they were not legally binding legal positions that we had to follow. And people just cannot grasp, Matt, the concept of if you don't have to give somebody something, why would you choose voluntarily not only to give them something, but to give them something with bells on and then pay for the privilege?
Well, I think partly it was influenced by this imperial guilt that many of the people in politics and the Foreign Office and in both of the established parties, Labour and Tory, feel. And I think they were partly shaped by this desire to, I guess, atone for the days of empire and to relinquish territory and to present themselves as the good guys who are on the right side of history. But as you say, the judgment that came down from the International Court was only advisory. The Chagosians didn't want it. We didn't have to do it. And there's a running theme, we've talked about this before on this show, but there's a running theme with both Keir Starmer and his ally, the Attorney General, Lord Hermer, which is whenever there's a choice between defending our interests as a sovereign nation state versus giving away our interests, undermining our interests, supporting our enemies, being soft on China, they always end up going with the latter. And I think that's been a running theme of this Labour government. And I think the question many people have asked from day one of this Starmer regime is, well, whose side are you really on?
You mentioned the Chinese embassy. Of course, you will have all followed this story about is it going to get approved, is it not going to get approved? Well, today, of course, we've got that news that it has indeed been approved. Do you think that was the right decision?
Well, on the information that's in the public domain, yes. And I understand why people have an issue with this decision, but I think fundamentally it's it's a coming together of different factors. Now, China is going to be one of the defining issues. Its growth, its development as a major global power in the 21st century. That is going to be a fact of life. How the UK and our Western allies manage that, respond to that, is going to be, again, one of the really important things that decides the future of the UK and the world. But I think the issue we have here is you either believe the security advice that is given by the security services, and they have said that they have no issue with this planning application, and actually some have pointed to there being security benefits from having the Chinese embassy on one site rather than spread over a number, or you don't. And then I think the other point on this is, fundamentally, we live in a world where China is a thing, it's a power, it has a role. We also have relationships with China and many other countries where they do have to have embassies.
Matt Goodwin?
Well, why not just give China a normal-sized embassy? Why not give China a standard embassy? Why does China need a mega embassy? Why does it need secret bunkers? Why does it need to be 1 metre away from critical infrastructure? If I said to you that we're going to build a mega embassy for the United Kingdom in the heart of downtown Beijing, and we're going to have secret bunkers and they're going to be 1 metre away from secret Chinese cables, what on earth do you think the Chinese Communist Party would say to us?
Yeah, look...
I mean, no, but seriously, just answer that one question.
Well,
why not give China a standard, normal-sized embassy?
Well, I don't know what a standard, normal-sized embassy looks like, and I think the point
I can take you around London if you'd like. We're going to go and look at the townhouses that are used around Mayfair and Knightsbridge if you'd like to see them.
But it's obviously it's a different point. But we saw in the last decade the US embassy move from
They're an ally.
And absolutely, but this was a site that was worked on under the last Tory government, where a former Tory Prime Minister at the time, Foreign Secretary, gave approval to use this site. Ultimately, I do think we have to be realistic about do we make a decision to have diplomatic relationships with other countries?
You can't actually answer the question, because we could just give them a normal embassy. And Labour can't have it two ways. You can't tell us nationally that the reason the country's in such a mess is because we have 14 years of Conservative governments, and then at the same time say, well, the reason we're making these decisions is because they started under 14 years of Conservative government.
Well, let's speak to one of the said Tories then, shall we? We're joined now by Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp. Chris Philp, good evening to you. Your reaction to the approval of this Chinese embassy today?
Good evening. Well, look, I think it's a shameful capitulation by Keir Starmer. He was getting pressured by President Xi, and he has caved in. Let's not forget, China has been spying on us. It's been spying on MPs. It's been stealing technology. It's been running secret police stations. It's been repressing Hong Kong dissidents and putting a bounty on their head. And they should not be getting rewarded by being given what they want, which is a super embassy, a far bigger embassy than any country needs. It will, of course, become a centre for espionage activity, not just in the UK, but across Europe. So the first point is they shouldn't be getting rewarded. The second point is there are very serious security risks that I don't think have been fully answered. They can't be fully mitigated or prevented, only partially. There's a very sensitive cable going very close to the embassy connecting Canary Wharf and the City of London. Now, why has it happened now? The answer is because Keir Starmer is very shortly going to travel to Beijing to meet President Xi. Starmer is desperate for an economic deal with Beijing in order to try and fix the economic mess that he and Rachel Reeves have created here in the UK. And what he's doing is he's trying to curry favour with the Chinese by giving them what they want, namely this super embassy, which they'll use as a base for spying on us and indeed spying across Europe.
Of what you just said there, Chris, but many of my viewers will actually be listening and watching to this and thinking that you are being a monumental hypocrite, because let's not lose sight of the actual facts here. In 2018, it was the Conservative government, Boris Johnson actually, that gave the diplomatic consent for this premises to be used as an embassy. That was a key factor in the fact that the Chinese actually went on to buy these premises and take over this freehold. Some of the issues that you've just described occurred before the original planning permission was put in 2022. Your party, many people would put to you, are the reason that this happened. And yes, the Labour Party have made the ludicrous decision to see it through to completion, but you guys started this.
Well, first of all, it was nothing to do with me personally. I never had any individual responsibility for those decisions, firstly. Secondly, you mentioned 2018. Now, 2018 is quite a long time ago. It's 6 years ago. And a lot has changed in those last 6 years. We've seen the way that China has behaved in the UK changing dramatically in that 6-year period. I've mentioned some of the things already: the secret police stations, repressing Hong Kong activists, stealing technology. Those are all things that have either happened or significantly accelerated in relatively recent time. And going back 8 years or 6 years, we obviously had, Hikvision and Huawei supplying components. It was only probably 3 or 4 years ago that the last government, so much more recently, that the last government said we're going to rip out Huawei from the 5G network and remove Hikvision, that's a Chinese CCTV company, from critical sites. So I think as a country, we've only become fully aware of the threat China poses, and they've only really stepped up their activity relatively recently, the last probably 3 or 4 years. And that is why we now take a very, very different view to the view that was taken in the past, because China's own behaviour has changed in those intervening 6 or 8 years.
That might be the case going back to 2018, but let's be clear now. This planning application was submitted in 2022, so lots of the things that you've just described have happened and certainly was known at that period in time. Your government still didn't step in to reject it. It actually lapsed in 2023, and as I say, it lapsed. It wasn't rejected, it was lapsed. It lapsed by the Conservatives. So if you guys are so concerned, and I share your concern, I think the concerns you raise are very valid, much of this was known when you guys were in power. So why didn't you stand up and turn around and say, no thank you, rejected?
Well, I mean, the fact is that when the Conservatives were in government, the planning permission was not granted. So the application was not approved
Was at a
when the
local level
Conservatives
by
were in
Tower
power.
Hamlets Council. This was not at a national level.
Yeah.
You left the local council, Tower Hamlets, to deal with it. They rejected it. It should have been passed up because of its significance. It should have been passed up to national level. You didn't have the balls to deal with it.
Well, hang on. I mean, it didn't need to be because it was rejected locally. And by the way, the last government could, if it had wanted to, the last government could have done what this Labour government have done. They could have called it in and approved it. The last Conservative government chose not to do that. So I think the facts speak for themselves. Under the last government, the application was rejected locally and it was not called in and approved nationally. That did not happen. But that has happened under this Labour government. And there was that awful recording of Keir Starmer at the I think it was the G20 in November 2024, when he said to President Xi, "Oh, you, President Xi, asked me, Keir Starmer, to take action, and I've taken action and called it in." He was actually reporting back to President Xi that Keir Starmer, had followed President Xi's instructions, which just illustrates quite how craven this capitulation has been. They are trading our national security for a few economic crumbs from China's table because Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves have done such a terrible job with our economy. Unemployment going up and jobs going down since the election because they've put taxes up, increased regulation and letting people get on welfare in record numbers. It's wrecked our economy and now they're trying to get the Chinese to bail us out and they're doing whatever Beijing want in order to secure some paltry economic deal. And we'll see Keir Starmer, no doubt, in a couple of weeks' time over in Beijing, metaphorically on his knees, begging for whatever deal he can get.
Sure, but my final point I would just let you reflect on is that nobody comes out of this well, Labour nor the Tories, because you yourselves, you will have recalled a letter that Boris Johnson sent a few years ago where he himself was celebrating the economic win post-Brexit, and he himself was salivating at the chops about the potential economic benefit that this would bring by bringing us closer to China. As always, the losers in this will be the British citizens, I am sure. But for now, Chris, thank you.
That was years ago. That was years ago. Times have changed, and no Conservative government ever gave this planning permission.
Sure. I don't think 2023 is that many years ago, actually. And whilst you didn't give planning permission, you didn't step up and cancel it either.
Hang on. The Boris letter was 2018. The Boris letter you're referring to was 2018.
Sure. And the planning permission lapsed in 2023, Chris, as you yourself know.
The Conservatives never gave it planning permission in 2023 or in any other year.
I know you didn't, but you didn't reject it. This is my point. You certainly didn't. You're accurate in what you say. You didn't approve it, but likewise, you didn't reject it either.
We didn't need to because Tower Hamlets. We didn't need to reject it because Tower Hamlets did reject it.
Oh, come off it! What a cop-out! You at a national level, you're happy to let these decisions be made by the minions at a local council level on an issue this big, a massive mega 5.4 acre.
If they had approved it, we could have called it in then. Look, the fact is, it didn't get permission under a Conservative government, right? That's the simple fact.
Chris Philp, we do agree on the fact that the whole thing is ridiculous and should not have been approved. But for now, thank you very much. Yeah. Right, there you go. Anything that you found interesting? What are you laughing at? I can't, right, I must tell you, ladies and gents, because you probably think that I go off on this little rant. I cannot bear hypocrisy, right? And I cannot bear politicians trying to score cheap political points from one another when all that happens is that you, me, all of us, we the British people are the ones that yet again suffer the consequences. We have had decades of political ridiculousness in this country. And I wouldn't actually mind if people stood up and came on here and said, you know what, we got it wrong. We regret setting the ball rolling. We shouldn't have played our parts, and now we regret it even more that it's gone over the hill. But they don't. They come on and they go, well, that wasn't me. That was somebody else.
But I think that is why the political system in this country is imploding, because everyone has had enough of the two parties that have dominated this country for the last century, but
then
especially the last 30 years.
Taking all the Tories in, so then people watching this think, hold on a second, even Reform are becoming the same.
Well, first things first, what we need in this country is a politics that actually puts the people of this country first and the strategic interests of this country first. And that means not selling off territory as we're doing in Chagos, and it means not selling out to our enemies like China. And, you know, I think reform has been, you know, consistent on all of those policies, which is we are a sovereign nation state. We want power returned to the people. We don't want power sent up to international elites making decisions on the people's behalf when they're not elected and they're not accountable.
I'm turning into an angry old woman. I am. I'm turning into, you know, one of those people that when you start getting older, you just start getting irritated by ridiculousness. I think that's what's happening to me, you know. Anyway, what do you make to it all?
Yeah, look, I get your frustration in terms of the Tories trying to score easy political points. I think what the Prime Minister and this government
do it as well. If I had £1 for every single time I hear a Labour politician, oh, it wasn't me. It was the Tories that did it. Honestly, I just find it infuriating and very boring.
I think on this, the government have made a choice, and they've made a choice that we have to have normal diplomatic relations with China. And yes, there will be people who raise security concerns. I think the government in the House of Commons today were really clear that all of the security services had signed this off, that the UK government's approach, that under the Prime Minister and this Labour government, is to have a normalised relationship with China where we recognise the unique threat and challenge they pose to us as a country, but also the economic benefits that having a relationship with China also has.
I just think you've got to be a special kind of stupid. If you fear that a state is actively working against you, you have to be a special kind of stupid to let them have a monumental 5.4-acre site literally a metre away from the critical infrastructure that powers so much essential things in this country. But hey, maybe I'm wrong. It's been known before. Tell me your thoughts. Anyway, today, I thought we were expecting a Labour defection to Reform UK. What happened with that?
Well, you'd have to ask the party. I do think that what's clear, if you look at the local level, councillors who are joining Reform, you know, there are a number that are coming from non-Conservative backgrounds. I think the membership now is up to around 270,000. Obviously, a lot of those people will be coming from across the political spectrum. Maybe many of them not really involved in politics before. I've said publicly, and I'll say it again, I think it's really important that Reform do not become a Tory tribute act. I do think that is really important, not only ideologically, in that I think Reform should be putting forward very different policies from the Conservative Party, but also just in terms of the personnel and the people at the top of the party. You can't be an anti-establishment revolt if you're recruiting large numbers of people from the establishment. But Nigel Farage knows that. I mean, the people at the top of Reform know that. They're not idiots. What I think people would like to see going forward, more defections from the Labour side, more defections from, dare I say, other political parties, the Lib Dems and others, and more defections from people from outside of the world of politics, from business, from education, from local public service, people who are saying, you know what, we recognise too that the uniparty of Tory and Labour politics is over and we need something else. This has to be grassroots, bottom-up, people-led, because it's the people who will end up saving this country, not the politicians that have nearly ruined this country over the last 30 years.
Luke, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt the momentum is with Reform, and I think my suspicion of Nigel Farage and Reform Party, and defer to you on your knowledge of the thinking sort of higher up in the command, is they've decided to... The first aim of their strategy of getting Nigel as Prime Minister is to try and find a way of killing the Tory party. And what better way of doing that than getting some high-profile defections? And there's no doubt the defection of Robert Jenrick last week was a potentially very sizable moment. I'd never write off the Conservative Party, but it was a big moment. I think the question for Reform, and I think it's where some of the questions have gone over the last week about, does it look like it's a Tory Tribute Act? And is there a danger that if you are seeking to be a new party with a new broom, why are you sort of bringing in Tory politicians who were the government ministers who were responsible for the last 14 years? That's a question. Now, I think if I was Reform, I would be worried if I couldn't get a number of high-profile Labour defections, and that's no doubt what the focus is. Let's see who the individual or individuals are. I would be amazed if there aren't some, but let's wait and see who they are.
Of course, I suspect a lot of those Labour people will start crossing the floor when what happens at the local elections becomes visible to everybody, which will be Reform running through Labour's Red Wall and parts of Wales with enormous strength, and a lot of Labour people will then sit up and think, hang on a minute, look at where this thing's going. But just briefly, because I noticed Lisa Nandy from your party has also compared Reform this week to fascism, and she's used the F word again. Just a reminder, perhaps Lisa Nandy might be watching this show indeed from Wigan, which according to all of the polling is going to move to Reform at the next general election. My definition of fascism, just while we're having this discussion, is cancelling local elections, scrapping jury trials, which of course are in Magna Carta, eroding free speech through things like the anti-Muslim hostility definition and non-crime hate incidents, and berating your political opponents at every opportunity, as Keir Starmer has done, as far right, not to mention trying to impose policies like digital ID, which weren't even in your party's manifesto. And the reason I'm raising this is because I think, you know, all we've seen this week from the Labour Party and Keir Starmer are these really childish attacks on Reform, you know, taking aim at Nigel Farage when he can't actually respond in the chamber. And there's no real serious understanding of why so many people are moving to Reform. And all Lisa Nandy, you know, this is supposed to be a Labour minister, serious person, front bench Labour politician has got is, well, this is fascism. Whereas everyone in this country knows this is clearly not fascism. This is a movement that is anchored in democracy, that is campaigning to have more elections, not scrapping them. Reform want more elections, they want more democracy. That doesn't sound like a fascist party to me.
Look, I don't think you should go around using terms like that about your political opponents. And I think last time we were on the show, I said this about the Labour approach to Reform. Look, Nigel Farage and Reform, I don't agree with their policies. I don't think they have the right view for the UK, but we should play the policies, not the man. And I also think, you know, there's a danger when there are people clearly at the moment who are signifying they're unhappy with how the country's going, that you have to try and persuade people on the policy substance and play the politics. Look, I think as Nigel Farage would say, it's a big, rough, tumble world, but actually let's have the debate on the substance, and that would be my approach. And I think, you know, as the approach when we discuss these things is the way I try and deal with it as well.
Nicholas has said, Michelle, what we need is more referendums. We should have a referendum on the Chinese embassy. We should have a referendum on Chagos. Nicholas, can you imagine we'd be there all day? One of the things that we had a referendum about, of course, was Brexit, and you will remember how much that divided the nation. One of the things that people got very angry about, where they were constantly told that because you voted Brexit, you were thick, you were a little bit dense, you were a bit uneducated, and you just needed to re-educate yourself, and therefore you might choose the right answer, which was apparently to remain. Well, there was a study out today, Matt Goodwin, and it's looking at basically opinions towards immigration. And what it was saying is that 55% of people in the UK with below A-level qualifications think immigrants living in the country without permission should not be allowed to stay, compared to just 36% of degree holders. So now people are suggesting that people's issue with uncontrolled immigration is just their lack of education.
Well, I don't know. I agree with that statement, and I've got a PhD, so I mean, I don't know where that puts me in the spectrum. I think this is often used by people in the expert class to try and imply that voters who don't want things that they want are somehow thick or uneducated, and we saw this during the Brexit wars. Actually, what you find is that people simply have very different views of the country and the world, depending on what kind of education they've had. So those people who do go to university, have university degrees, they attach much more importance to their university qualifications. They say, hey, I'm a degree holder. Whereas people who haven't passed through the universities, dare I say, haven't been politically indoctrinated by institutions that lean very strongly to the left, they say, actually, there's more to me than my qualifications. I identify with my nation. I identify with my local area. I identify with a way of life. And they're different, they're very different worldviews. You know, they're not more superior or inferior to one another. The other thing I would just say, by the way, is that, you know, the idea that the expert class is more educated and therefore right about everything. From, you know, the people that told us that successive lockdowns would be good for the country, the people who told us that little boys can become little girls and little girls can become little boys, who ignored who ignored science for years until the Supreme Court and others had to point out how stupid it was. You know, I don't exactly have much faith in the expert class, so I'm very hesitant and cautious about these kinds of studies.
Luke?
Look, I saw it. I wasn't quite clear what the point of the piece was entirely trying to make. But the one thing I would say is immigration has been either the number one or number two issue in terms of the polling for the last couple of years, in terms of the issue of the general population's worry. And look, I think people come from all sorts of backgrounds. I know people such as my best friend in the world, never gone to university, one of the brightest, smartest, cleverest people I've ever met in my life. I think these sort of polls and research, I'm sure there's a point to them. I don't entirely understand them, but, you know, look, fundamentally, people have different experiences. They engage in the world, have different backgrounds, as Matt has said, about the different things that they care about and their experiences. And I think the more, as a country, we don't fall into these silos where we feel like we're all opposed and that there's not more that we care about in terms of the country. Look, fundamentally, my view of all politicians on the whole is they all want this to be the best country to grow up in the world. They just disagree about how to achieve that.
I think the point of this study and articles like this is very clear. I believe that they are intended to shame people into changing their views, because I think when you're constantly saying to somebody, you feel like that and you think like that and you have your view, and it's just because you're thick. At some point, when you are repeatedly told you're uneducated, you're stupid, you know, leave the sensible conversations and decisions to the grown-ups, at some point, when you're constantly getting told that over and over again, for a group of people, that will make you go inward, kind of suppress a little bit, become smaller, and that's what governments want. They want people who are challenging their positions and policies to become smaller, to go inward, to become quieter, to fragment. They don't want a large, loud bloc rallying against their policy. So I think this is very deliberate. And I will always remember Emily Thornby when she saw that flag on the white van, and she made a really gross comment, basically insulting the person for being proud of their country. I will always remember when Gordon Brown made that comment about, I think it was Gillian Duffy off the top of my head, when he called her a bigot when she raised concerns about her local community. So I think this is very deliberate, this kind of suggestion and name-calling. Am I wrong?
Well, I mean, look, I haven't had a chance to read the whole thing, but I get that sense of people who feel like they've been talked down to. I mean, fundamentally, and there are people who seek to do that, to marginalise people, especially when they don't think they should have the choice in the decision. But fundamentally, and this is, you know, the wonderful thing about this country, we have a parliamentary democracy. You can get rid of them and vote them out next time in the election if you don't like them.
Well, if you've still got a country left by the end of the term, yeah, you can. But anyway, I ain't got a degree, so what do I know? Don't go anywhere, ladies and gents. The conversation will continue after the break. I'm Michelle Dewberry. This is Dewbs & Co. with you until 7.
Hello, everyone. Patrick Christie is here. GBNews, Britain's news channel.
Access the stories that matter to you. Take the GBNews family with you on any device, and as long as you have an internet connection. Tune in to GB News anywhere on the planet or beyond. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Do you trust what you're being told? Good, because neither do I.
Those are just facts.
I'm Alex Armstrong, and on my show, we'll expose the spin.
Well, I want to answer that, because you didn't let me last time, because you always speak over me.
The broken promises.
To deny that is denying the truth.
And the hypocrisy.
We can allow.
Stop.
We can allow.
Politics, policy, parliament. Nothing is off limits. No sugarcoating, no fear of offence, just the truth laid bare. Tune in every Saturday and Sunday at 9 p.m. for Alex Armstrong Tonight, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Decisions made in Washington aren't just shaping America, they're shaping Britain too. From migration to global security, from crime to health. Whatever happens in the White House today
will be felt in your town or city tomorrow.
That's why The Late Show is live from Washington, D.C.
Cutting through the politics to show you what it all means for Britain.
The Late Show live every night at midnight.
Only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs and Kurt. With me, Michelle Dewberry, Matt Goodwin and Luke Sullivan. It's all right, everyone. I checked the CVs in the break. They have got degrees, so I shall let them continue giving us your thoughts. Wouldn't want to be spoken to by anyone without a degree, would we now? Look, Nikki says, Michelle, the Chagos deal won't happen because Donald Trump has basically vetoed it now. Speaking of Donald Trump, by the way, he is supposed to be getting up and speaking out any day now. A year since his inauguration. He's not on the stage yet, so worry not, you're not missing anything. One of my viewers say the Chagos deal was for security. Michelle, why don't people seem to grasp that? Ivy says, Michelle Kerstam, I couldn't care less about democracy in Britain, so why on earth do you think that he should even care about democracy in Chagos? She says. Now, one of the things that I want to talk to you about before I bid you farewell is social media. Do you think that under 16s should have access to it now? Of course, the Labour Party are giving us a consultation on this. Let's take a listen to Liz Kendall earlier on today.
We will bring forward a swift 3-month consultation on further measures to keep children safe online. This will include the option of banning social media for children under 16. And raising the digital age of consent to stop companies using children's data without their or their parents' consent. The consultation will include a range of other options too, such as whether there should be curfews overnight, breaks to stop excessive use or doom scrolling.
Matt Goodwin, where are you on this?
I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I agree with the Labour Party. And the reason that I actually am very concerned about social media among young people is I've read a lot of the research, people like Jonathan Haidt and others who have shown pretty clearly and consistently that social media is having very negative effects on the psychology of young people, especially young girls, and lots of mums and dads out there, I think, will relate to that. And I don't think fundamentally we, as humans, to be frank, are ready for these things. I've seen the changes in society. You know, I grew up pre-social media, before these became standard. And I prefer society before we all had these and we were walking around like zombies and doom scrolling. I really do. I prefer society before these. I think they've had a terrible impact. And I say that as somebody that has to use them daily for work. But the idea of allowing children into the sort of Wild West. And yes, I understand the arguments. Can you ever really control it? Are you going to push them further into more extreme places and so on? But I think we either care about the well-being of our children or we don't. And while we're here, can I just say something else, just to throw the cat among the pigeons? I also think we should ban OnlyFans, because I think we are living in a society where we are implicitly encouraging the sexualisation, the pornification of our children. I don't agree with
Just hold that. That is a really interesting and relevant thought. But Donald Trump is just walking onto the stage. Let's just listen to what he's got to say as well.
First anniversary, January 20th, and it's been an amazing period of time. We have a book that I'm not going to read to you, but these are the accomplishments of what we've produced. All page after page after page, individual things. I could stand here and read it for a week and we wouldn't be finished. But we've done more than any other administration has done by far in terms of military, in terms of ending wars, in terms of completing wars. Nobody's really seen very much like it. I think it's appropriate that because Minnesota is so much in the fray, and I say to my people all the time, and they're so busy doing other things, they don't say it like they should. They're apprehending murderers and drug dealers and a lot of bad people, and these are just some of the more recent ones that we have, and I can show you some of the people, vicious, many of them murderers. These are all out of Minnesota, just Minnesota. I say, why don't you talk about that more? Because people don't know. Do you want to live with these people? International murder. These are people that are living, they're apprehended and either put in jails in their country from where they came, or the countries respect us, and so they actually put them there. In the old days, they didn't respect our country. Biden wouldn't do this because he let them all in. If you didn't have open border policies of Biden, none of this, all of the things that all of the time that we spend talking about Minnesota and everything else, most of them are coming from out of the country. And it's been caused by a previous administration. Look at this, one after one. Boy, these are rough characters. These are all criminal, illegal aliens that, in many cases, they're murderers, they're drug lords, drug dealers, they're the mentally insane. There's some of them who are brutal killers, they're mentally insane. They're killers, but they're insane. These are just in Minnesota. In California, it's worse. In other states, it's worse. No, Minnesota, the crime is incredible. The financial crimes are incredible. And the problem is because of the agitators and insurrectionists, whatever you want, troublemakers, but they're paid agitators and insurrectionists. Nobody talks about the fact that $19 billion at a minimum is missing in Minnesota, given to a large degree by Somalians. They've taken it. Somalians, can you imagine? And they don't do it. A lot of very low IQ people, they don't do it. Other people work it out, and they get them money, and they go out and buy Mercedes-Benzes, and they come from here, they have no money. They never had money. They never had a life. They never had a government. They never had a country, because there's basically no country. Somalia is not even a country. They don't have anything that resembles a country. And if it is a country, it's considered just about the worst in the world. They come here and they become rich and they don't have a job. I was told that Ilhan Omar is worth $30 million. She never had a job. She's a crooked congressman. So here's another one. And I have, oh, by the way, we just took out, these are all what ICE is doing. And it's a dangerous job. These are rough people. Weapons. This one here is very bad. I'm going through this because I think we have plenty of time. I'm going to place, beautiful place in Switzerland, where we'll be, I'm sure I'm very happily awaited for. In Switzerland, they don't know about this. They don't have this problem. They have other problems, but they don't have this problem. Look, killed somebody. Look, and these are rough people. These are not, this was all allowed into our country through open borders. These dumbest policies, you know, men and women's sports is dumb. But to me, having an open border for the world to come in, drug dealers and prisoners. Venezuela, as an example, opened their prisons into the United States. That's why, one of the reasons I felt so strongly against Venezuela. Now, I'm loving Venezuela. They've been working with us so well. It's been so nice. And an unbelievably nice woman also did a very incredible thing, as you know, a few days ago. We're talking to her, and maybe we can get her involved in some way. I'd love to be able to do that. Maria, maybe we can do that. But we're dealing with the people and the president and all of the people in Venezuela, and we've been doing great. The oil companies are getting ready to make massive investments there. They have more oil than even Saudi Arabia. There you go. These are real, these are rough water. This is all Minnesota, every one of them. This is one state out of many. And these people are, let's see, yeah, these are all, so far, people that came from outside of the country. They were allowed in by Sleepy Joe Biden, Crooked Joe Biden, whichever you like. You can call him whatever you like. They're both right. He's sleepy and he's crooked. He was the worst president we've ever had. And we've had some bad ones, too. I can tell you, all you have to do is look at trade. You're not getting bored with this, right? I hope you don't. But these are people that you have to see. Strong-arm rape, aggravated assault with a weapon, and many other crimes. Gang member, known as one of the toughest people around. These are tough people. So this is what the people are trying to protect, because all ICE wants to do is get them out of our country, bring them to prisons and jails and mental institutions from where they came. That's all they want to do. They're patriots, and they have to be abused by guys like Don Lemon, who's a loser, lightweight. I saw him the way he walked in that church. It was terrible. I have such respect for that pastor. He was so calm. He was so nice. He was just accosted. What they did in that church was horrible yesterday. Look at this. 24 convictions. 24 times convicted. They're not charges. These are convictions. So he comes from outside the country. Do you think he's going to be good here? He's convicted 24 times. He's going to be good here, right? It doesn't work that way. It's a man murder. It's one of many. One of many. All they want to do is get him out. They want to take him out of our country. And we're met with paid agitators and insurrectionists, troublemakers. They're paid. You know, when the woman was shot, I felt terribly about that. And I understand both sides of it. But when she was shot, there was another woman that was screaming shame, 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 right? You saw it. So loud. She was like a professional opera singer. She was so loud and so professional. She wasn't a woman that was hurt, like, oh, my heart's injured. She was a professional. She's shame, shame. She's screaming, shame, shame. I said, that's not a normal person. That's a professional. These are professional agitators and professional people that want to see our country do badly. But that's not happening because we have the hottest country anywhere in the world, despite this stuff. Look at this. All top of the line criminals. They're not going to be good. They're not going to be well behaved here. I could do thousands. We had over 3,000 in the last fairly short while. Just in Minnesota. What's the number, Carol? 10,000.
10,000 criminals arrested in Minnesota alone.
10,000 criminals. And these are serious criminals. How can a place with 10,000 criminals, how can you have a state? And yet they're fighting us. Yeah, I like that guy. He keeps nodding to me. You agree with me, I guess. I like him. I don't know who he is, but I like him. He keeps nodding. He says, you're right. He's obviously a little on the right side, maybe. Look. These are rough ones. So this, we just took this off a stack. We have many stacks like this. Like, I could go 30 times what I'm showing you now. Relations with Hezbollah, that's nice. We allow them in our country. I'm just looking at these charges. It's just pretty incredible. Many murderers, many murderers. People that murdered. So what ICE does, and Border Patrol is incredible, too. I mean, Paul Perez and that group is incredible. Mostly Hispanic, by the way. They're like 60% Hispanic. You know, they talk about Hispanic. They're mostly Hispanic, right? And they're unbelievable people. And then they say, oh, we discriminate against. I love Hispanic. They are unbelievable. Entrepreneurial. They have everything. I did great. I did